this really is a day to look at the symbiotic relationship between art and technology. And these are the conversations that they're looking to have with you today and talk about how you can work together to do some amazing things. And I think a recent example of that, and James, maybe you can start with that, is just some of the work you did with Weta just recently in order to bring Avatar to life. A little movie that everybody, I'm sure, has seen to the screen.
Yeah, so we worked closely with Weta to retool their render farm. They had a, or as they say, render wall. They had a lot of stipulations. They had a certain, obviously the whole premise behind Avatar is the environment, or the backdrop is the environment and doing well by the planet. So along those lines, behind the scenes, obviously you want to they have a certain power footprint in their building, so they wanted to increase the compute capabilities drastically because it was a significantly more data than the first film within the same power footprint. So we worked with them during the pandemic and Dell to retool their render wall, and a lot of testing. And then, of course, because of the pandemic, there was a scarcity of silicon. So I cannot confirm or deny, but we might have stolen a few CPUs from an order for maybe Twitch or Google and a few others, and made sure that Weta got all the CPUs they need to render the that fantastic film that we all saw in December and the beginning of the year. But it did highlight how overtly dependent films like Avatar that want to suspend the disbelief and create amazing visual effects, the reliance on technology and on bleeding technology. So there was a huge amount of sort of trust to work with us and to try new pieces of technology. And it had its bumps, but obviously it worked out well in the end.
So let's talk about a few of the big technology trends that we can be talking about here today, and one of them is certainly real time. So Simon, do you want to jump in and just talk a little bit about where you are today with real time and what maybe some of the things that we can talk about out there at some of the stands?
So I think from a real-time perspective, obviously working in conjunction many times with AMD, but other partners around here, everything from a real-time perspective has become really front and center for all of the productions in terms of where we are. Whether we're talking about real-time volumetric capture, real-time tracing for animation, and so on, a lot of that requires immense amounts of compute, storage, and so on, right, in terms of bringing those things to the productions, right? We talk a little bit about, from our perspective, on bringing cloud or infrastructure to the media to some degree, and that's really about what real-time is all about. Especially as we need to increase the productivity, the efficiency, the speed of which we do productions and so on, James. I think it's been really, really key. Some of the things you're going to see around some of the panels and technology that we put out here, both from some great partners, of AMD and Microsoft. I think what we've developed, leveraging obviously the backbone of core Microsoft or AMD technology, but also working with partners around that, is also really fundamental. It will only get better, right? And I think it's putting the hands of the real-time components into the hands of the creatives to really enable them to use it in a better way. Part of that is showing and telling a little bit about today, but also getting hands-on experience and trusting that in terms of how it would work. James, would you add to that?
Yeah. Trust is a big part of it, and being willing to ask questions when you get a new piece of technology. We were speaking about it earlier. When we roll out new technology, you would like to think there's a bump in performance, and there oftentimes is a big bump in performance, but it could be even greater if they had a conversation or a dialogue with the Microsofts, with the AMDs and NVIDIAs or Panasonic or whoever it is. Depending on what they're doing, they could be leaving performance on the table. So the dialogue is very, very important. Things like the production summit are very important because when people think of technology, I like to say this, when people think of technology, they think of a physical piece of equipment, but really technology and innovation is the biggest part of it is a conversation, is sharing ideas, is how the hell did you do that? Would you like to see this aspect in the technology? and when you share those ideas and you make mistakes, you end up enabling a future generation of a piece of technology that will encompass that exact thing to solve that exact problem.
I think perfect. Yeah, I mean, I think from a real-time perspective, though, I think everyone in this room is challenged by doing things and getting real-time feedback on everything they're creating, right? And sometimes just even the millisecond delay, the buffering, whatever else it might be, is fundamentally critical to our production process. And no doubt, I'm like, on the Microsoft side, we hear about it, right? If something goes down, doesn't work, or whatever, and it's I'm like, it's pretty
immediately
fun. And so it's pretty fun, right? So I think the reliability and the scalability is also pretty critical, right? Because not only are we doing things that are on a planned schedule, but there are things that are live that can't be disrupted, right? And so it's fundamental, right? And I think that's really where I would say there's a cost component for sure around leveraging things like the cloud, but it's really one of the things that only and a Microsoft person would say that, right? That's the only thing the cloud can provide. But I think it's probably pretty true.
Yeah. No, real time, whether it's live to tape, a production like Barbie. I know they used a lot of LED walls in Leavesden, England, and they were very reliant on the real-time aspect of that. That was Threadripper and Epic AMD CPUs and NVIDIA GPUs, but the reliance is very, very huge on those. Those go down. That's a lot of money that ticks by if those screens aren't working and those assets aren't displayed properly.
This is still such a new area. When we're talking about it today, and just in general, when you're with customers, what would you say is the biggest misconception about where we stand today with real time, and would you clarify what that might be?
Ooh, yeah. I would venture to say that a lot of people that I often use the word neophyte, but that's kind of insulting. People that don't understand what real time is might think that everything that you would see on a stage that's real time is final, and that's what you see on the screen. I like to say it's an elevated canvas. It gets you a certain amount there, whether it's 70, 80%, but that last 20, 30% is an artist. The foot placement, the hand, the way the hand's grabbing an object. There's still a significant amount of color correction, encoding, transcoding. That there's a lot of things that go on after the thing is shot. So real time doesn't mean you shot it and it's done. Yet the flip side of that is it's not as complicated as people think. So those two words together, virtual and production, some folks are possibly scared to seek to understand of what that actually means. It is for everybody, whether you're an independent filmmaker, student, right the way up to Jim Cameron. Just seek to understand and ask questions, because everybody else wants to ask the same bloody questions. Right.
I could comment. I mean, I think James is dead right. I mean, from a real-time perspective, and the issues with essentially what you're talking about is adoption, right, in terms of how it's used. I think there's simplification that can for sure occur. There needs to be more collaborative conversations between the technology vendors and the other partners who are creating the technology and how it all comes together. There's a lot of support out there. And to James's point, I mean, it's amazing the things that cross my door, which is just really simple questions, because people are afraid to ask. They don't know what's out there. Or they don't know who to use, or who's using what, and where the best options are. And I think it's amazing, and that information just doesn't flow as easily as it should. From my perspective, James, I think there's a lot of learnings we can take that just aren't shared. This is why these events are super important.
You mentioned LED and virtual production. Specific to that, certainly, when we talk about it. In addition to costs and budgeting being different, schedules change. What's done, pre-pro is different, and then there's, again, just understanding how to light a set properly. There's so many issues that are really very new in virtual production. What are some of the areas that we could talk about, that you'd like to talk about today, that that maybe we can all become more educated and understand better today?
Wow, that's a big question. I mean, I think for sure an understanding of what the technology can and can't do. I think where we rely on it, I think is important. I'll wait for you to bring up the AI conversation, and so we'll just think about where that stands.
That's next.
I think obviously, a little bit around the conversation that James and I, many of you probably have in this room, and it's interesting to go to conversations with creatives, whether we're talking about Game of Thrones or other stuff that Microsoft and other teams have helped with, and it's amazing to see that a lot of virtual production sound stages get set up, and they're fundamentally never used. They're not used as much as they could be, right? A lot of time and effort goes into putting all those things together, and then for creatives not to want to use them, they don't trust them. To your point earlier, James, and I think it's understanding where that stuff comes from, and there's also a little trust that can go between the creatives and the technology companies as well in terms of how that's put together. So that's kind of my response.
Yeah, I think that the whole premise behind virtual production is to make traditional production is three, previous to computer graphics was three pillars: pre-production, production, and post. And I think the premise behind virtual production is to make it fairly one iterative process. And during Avatar, and when that was the first one, when that was getting sort of the kinks were getting worked out, and we were discovering as we were going, that was virtual production there. And that's still in play, yet with LED walls, it's sort of a new chapter. And I think that if industry professionals and even enthusiasts that want to get into the business go and seek out these stages that are all over the place now, and ask them about if you can take it for a test run, so you can understand how it can be used, rather than just not having any practical knowledge of how it works, and just assuming just from what you've seen it's not for me, because it could actually be. It speeds up production, and eliminates guesswork, and I think at the end of the day it makes for a better piece of content for the audience, because you can try an awful lot more if you truly use virtual production and real-time visualization to its fullest. There's more discovery. You can make more mistakes. You can be more human. Because you want people to talk about your products so you can sell more, we shot a lot of testimonial videos, and during takes, we've had a couple of different artists or operators say, "Is the camera rolling? Can I say this? Since we've been using your technology, I can actually make more mistakes. And in that, I discover what I can and cannot do. And in some of those instances, we've been able to discover great things, because essentially they've been given more time with the shots, more time with their art, more time with the sequences."
James, I want to just say one other thing, right? So from my role, I spend as much time with studios as I do with advertising agencies and broadcasters and everybody else around the world. There is no question, right, that we have not democratized access to some of these virtual production tools enough, and they are available, right, in terms of other parts of the industry. There are advertising agencies around the world who are using virtual production every day, right, to figure out stuff, because they've got to create content 10 times faster than we create it on a studio lot, for example. And it is faster, it is quicker in terms of how they do it, but they've also figured out the scale around it, the cost around it, the technology that they've used. It's amazing, right? I mean, and so those shared learnings from other parts of the industry, when we say media and entertainment, what does that really mean, right? Well, there's a lot of different verticals to that process, right? And I think it's sometimes forgotten. And I want to make sure, as part of this panel, this process, right? And it's actually been a learning inside Microsoft too for everybody, is understanding what the industry really is, right? And virtual production is a component of it and what it can do. But lots of other parts of the industry are also using it in different ways, right, to figure that part out. And so I think it's...
Could you provide an example?
So, I mean, we do a lot of stuff with live sports, for example, on the Microsoft side, right? And so we think about how we use virtual production, whether we bring in graphics and other pieces to live productions. We use some of our game engine technologies on the Xbox side to also implement that. We work with other vendors to keep all of these high-end graphics sitting at the edge, right, where we can bring them in real time, where we need them to because of the latency, the other things that need to be there. And so what we've learned through those other industries is that we can do those things, and we can bring those learnings and shared efficiencies back to studios where, let's talk about it, right? The cost is really high, right? And so you want to bring those costs down and efficiencies as much as you possibly can. So those shared learnings, whether we're using stuff with I think Perry was here last year, right, talking about stuff with WPP and what they'd done with LiDAR technology and others, and using the Boston Scientific robot dogs, and just democratizing access to content that can just be stored and leveraged and used. And we'll get to the AI component in a moment, right, where you can really bring those AI content engines to those virtual production walls to change things in real time by the flick of a switch, right? And those are real meaningful savings and audience engagement tools that are just fundamental, right, going forward.
Let's start on that AI topic, shall we? So it goes without saying that AI has become an enormous topic here in Hollywood because of the strikes, but obviously it's not a new topic either. So, Simon, why don't you start why don't you start in general, just like what is in your mind, what is the how would you position AI in the industry right now? And then would you elaborate a little bit on some of the things that you hinted at?
So we were prepping for this question a little bit, just because of everything that's going on in, yes, corporately, yeah. So I think for me, a couple things to share. I think there's no doubt, right, that AI has been part of our industry for a good number of years. And from a Microsoft standpoint, we didn't start doing it 6 months ago, although it might have seemed that we did, with everything else that's come out. It's also probably fair to say that for the first time in quite some time, Microsoft is pretty cool in terms of what we're doing, right or wrong. But I would say that it's here to stay, right? And so one of the things, if you've seen everything from any of the other studios that put things out, or these other vendors that have started to create AI-type tools, they're only going to get better. Okay, they're only going to get better. What you see today is only the early stages of what we've actually put together. And from all of the stuff that's been done around AI with inside studios, whether it be audience engagement or algorithms that have been created around personalization, they've been there. You may not have always seen them. What has really occurred over the past 6 months with these large language models and everything else is really just democratize access to it. Right? That's what we've done. We've made it easier for people. And my productivity alone has gone through the roof, right? I can now do things. I didn't even create any conversations around ChatGPT for this conversation. I mean, I could have. I mean, it's very easy. But what I would say is that for this group and this audience, right, the capabilities are going to be there. But the real challenge is how you exercise it. What are you going to do with it? Where are you going to apply it? How do you figure it out? And from a governance standpoint, you can end up with multiple strategies, or you can have one or two, right, and figure out why you want to do them. I see lots of organizations asking all of the big 4 or 5 consulting companies, what should I do? How do I do it? Well, the reality is the tech companies are also getting asked the very same question, because we already applied it. How did we do it? And why are we using it? But for me, I encourage folks to embrace it. It's not going anywhere. And I would also say that on the Microsoft side, just because I'm going to make sure I make this point clear, we're also very concerned about the ethical use of it, the safety use of it. What does it mean? We always ask the right questions about where it should be applied and how it does it get applied. But are we investing in it? Yes. Is it going to help the industry? Yes, it is, and it should, right? I'll make maybe some bold claims after James has spoken, but I would say that it is a tipping point in terms of where it's been. There was a conversation, does anyone go to NAB or any of those other trade? Yeah, so one of the interesting things about the cloud, right, is as much content goes into the cloud today on the media side, as much comes out. We don't keep it up there, which is not entirely helpful. But AI should and could automate that to be a tipping point, to be really automate the production process end to end by keeping everything in the cloud and making it scalable and more usable end to end, right, which is what we haven't seen. And if you're a studio executive and you want to take cost out of the process, it's going to be fundamental, right? Because there's a lot of processes. Everyone in this room struggles with resources, right? I guarantee you don't have enough people to do what you need to do. I don't have it on the Microsoft side either, right? And so there are things that AI can help us do, right? But it's applying it in the right way and exercising the right caution around where do I apply it. So that's my response.
Do you want to just provide, before we move on, like an example or two of some of these processes that can be improved with?
Sure. So, I mean, I'm going to use a couple, one from advertising and maybe one from studios, which is interesting. So, some of you may have gone and said, I need a marketing brief or something like that created. And what I'm seeing across the advertising landscape is people being able to create marketing campaigns in days or weeks compared to months, right? We're talking about people who can take data and streamline it in 35 seconds, really fast. They can use DALL-E prompts to create campaigns around all of those things within days and come out. So you're seeing exponential time saved around that process. On the production side for studios, for example, we're also seeing a lot of processes that can just be automated, right? Whether it be dubbing, subbing, localization, and those kind of pieces, where today you've got a lot of manual hands-on activities that go on, and you pass this stuff left to right. One of the other components that we are also seeing is the concept of like a digital backlot, for example, where assets are stored in one place or the other, and you have to go physically find them. How do I index them? What does it look like? Is it raining? Is it gray? Whatever else it might be. And then I can actually find those pieces of content relatively quickly. And so I'm able to just do things I've never done without having to have a computer scientist sitting on my team, right? And so that's another key component that I think on the Microsoft side that we see, is that with the way that these models are being created, the way that this technology is being put together, we're fundamentally impacting the way that people's job skills are going to be there, right? I mean, the prompt engineers are going to be the new software engineers, right? That's really what it comes down to, understanding how to ask these large language models what to do, right? So it's interesting, and that's going to be applied across everyone in this room.
Yeah, from our perspective, we're working. Well, our CEO has been public and said, Lisa Su has been public in saying that AI will be a component in every piece of AMD technology moving forward. We have close relationships, and we rely heavily on our relationships with our ISVs, independent software vendors, so the Adobes, Blackmagics of the world. When you create, and AI is a delicate subject, by the way, because there's a lot of ethics and morals in rolling it out. So I think we're both speaking very carefully and slowly about this, because we don't want to misspeak, because there are a lot of misperceptions about AI out there. But there's a need in the industry. Obviously, the demand for content doesn't go anywhere. It's just getting higher. There's more demand for better, more believable content. So when you can do auto-roto, or you can do frame recognition and have AI help you with what shot was placed where and where it was stored, so you can get much easier access to it, what shirt a guy was wearing, who's in a particular shot, without actually taking notes and trying to dig and figure out where something is. There's a lot of great ways in which AI is helping productions that isn't scary and doesn't violate ethics and hasn't recreated somebody's image and it's being used without their approval. So I get the sense that because of the modern climate we're in presently in August 2023, people are looking at it from a very scary perspective. Peel that away. AI is and has been used for good, not just for evil, guys.
What guardrails do you feel need to be put in place in the media and entertainment industry and as we proceed with the use of AI?
I think some overt verbiage, communication. I think framing, right? Because disappointment, anger, and frustration is from misframed expectations. And so I think communication from the tech companies that are providing technology to film, television, advertising on, look, guys, this is where it's going to help you out, and then this is the area that we'd like to discover with you, right? We're actually publicly traded companies that are ethical, that will educate you on what we're doing, because contrary to what you may think, we're all about responsible AI. And I think that's that phrase "responsible AI" is something that gets echoed a lot around AMD, and I'm pretty sure at Microsoft too.
For sure.
Was that a dodge? I'm not trying to dodge. I'm just,
No, I think responsible AI is right. I think so. People probably want to understand a little bit about Microsoft's role with OpenAI, right? I can talk about that for a second, what that means, right? So we are an investor in them. We do not own that corporation. Technically, they're a competitor, right, in terms of where we stand. But one of the things that Microsoft thinks about in terms of our kind of process around AI is that we want to bring that responsible AI component, right? So what have you found is that people who've used OpenAI, many of you might have, right, gone on ChatGPT, whatever else it might be, but it's open source, right? So what do we already see? Some organizations have already found their data sitting out there and people being able to leverage it, right? That's not great. The data is your fundamental, it's a new currency, right, in terms of where we stand, right? So the data becomes incrementally more important. And so protecting that data, what do you do with it? The IP, right? Because when I think about studios going forward, the IP is the most important, right? It's what they've created, it's what they've harnessed, whether they put it on a platform, whatever else, it's what they need to protect, right? And so you don't want, we already have a little bit of IP proliferation if you go to YouTube and other things, right, where you find content that really shouldn't be there, right? But it is there, and some studios have kind of done their best to stop it. But I would say that from a Microsoft standpoint, yes, it's all about responsible AI. How do we deploy it? How do we use it? And that's doing that in partnership, really, with the studios and the executives and how it's going to be deployed. And they're asking lots of the great questions, but I want to bring it back to data, because data really drives all this stuff. When I talk to the conversations with these leaders, it's all about, is my data going to be protected? Are you going to use my data to train the models? What is that going to look like? How do you make sure it's protected? How do I make sure my stuff is not going to appear on someone else's platform that you don't have any IP control over? And so making sure we have those conversations, because spinning up, just for example, spinning up an Azure AI instance is as simple as spinning up just an Azure instance. It's the same thing, right? And so you can deploy it very quickly in the same way. And so the responsible part is making sure that we work with the studios and the creatives and others to make sure they've got the right parameters and controls. And I guarantee you, there are people in the kind of community who are using stuff without any guardrails. And they haven't been educated on the guardrails, what it really means, and what's going to happen. And so that's a little bit about where AMD and Microsoft come in a little bit in thinking about how do we provide those guardrails to make sure that only the best practices are applied.
And have you had conversations with amongst yourselves or with the studios or anything, how to implement them? I mean, will there be some sort of, do you believe there'll be some sort of formal, this is how we're going to approach AI going forward?
What there should be. We should get them all together. I think that's a good point. There should be. That one of the things that I think is unique about the media and entertainment industry is that, from my perspective, we all share technology. Like, here's how we're using technology, and then you keep your IP, your plot points, your characters, your designs. That's obviously proprietary, and you keep that secret. One of the things we've said to a couple of different studios is, if you're putting together a PowerPoint presentation on a new piece of IP, don't use AI to do it online, because then that's going to be out there, right? So I think you sort of touched on that, but in as far as like keeping your IP secretive, but I think there should be. I don't know that we've done that sort of behind closed doors with the studios, but there's definitely. One of the things that Simon and I spoke about when we first got together earlier this year was we have an opportunity as two of the biggest companies that are actually rolling out AI to the world is an opportunity to educate and disarm the community about what it actually is, how they can use it, how they should use it, and how we've been using it.
Events like this.
Yes.
Well, I think we do talk to a lot of studios, to James's point. I would say that they're all at different maturity levels around where they understand it, how they deploy it. And I think it's new, right, in terms of where they stand. I mean, the reality is actually, it's an interesting point, right? So for most studios or people within this industry, right, there's a lot of differences around where we are in our digital transformation, right? Who's got what technology. But we're all at a very, very similar starting points when it comes to AI, right, in terms of where do we deploy. And I talked about it earlier, right? I said, it's not about where the capabilities are, it's about how you exercise it, right? Where are you going to put it? Where are you going to find the right place to do it? So there are processes or procedures, right, that you could deploy it to, but what am I really looking for? I'm looking for return on investment, right? I want to understand, where am I going to spend my time, because I've got limited engineers to go and do whatever I can, right? So I want to figure out whether I spend my time doing something that's going to take me 12 months to build it, or do I see something in a month to build it, right? Because all of us get killed on projects that take too long to ever get done, and then we never see how it all come together, right? And so I think that the beauty of putting like a governance process, or at least understanding how to kind of frame that conversation, is to actually see some real value and productivity out of it, right? I mean, it's going to be here. It's not going away. And so I think it's now trying to just figure out how to embrace it, but with the right ethical and responsible guardrails in front of it.
One thing I think anyone who works in visual effects will agree to is that, a believable digital human is probably the most difficult, or one of the most difficult tasks. Um, how would you describe the state of the art today, and how can AI contribute to it and your own technology developments?
Sort of this, I think, yeah, that's a multifaceted response there. The, I think we were talking earlier that I think there's a misperception among actors that the technology companies are going to take their likeness and put them in all sorts of different things. There's a lot of actual work that goes into doing a deep fake, and a deep fake on YouTube is different than a deep fake on a 70-foot screen in a movie theater. So I think through the use of motion capture and facial capture, yeah, you can recreate a live action character, but as far as doing it completely without an actor even stepping into a volume or a facial capture volume, then you're getting into uncanny valley conversations. And the truth is, from the technology side, we're not anywhere near the point where we can just not even involve an actor and have them be in a major live action feature film without them even knowing it. We're nowhere near that happening. So, I don't know if they overtly understand that, but that's the case right now. I mean, we're working with the real-time engines, but I don't think we're there as far as that goes.
Well, I'm going to say one other thing before I answer the question, which is I think I put it out there the other day, right? I think it's about, in terms of this, visual effects piece and whether we can recreate the human and all that kind of stuff and so on, great. But I think it's really about diversifying technology to kind of supplement and support storytelling, right? I think ultimately, when I think about the great conversations we've had right up here, but we're talking about Avatar or other movies, right? And I'm thinking about some of the stuff that we've done with Disney, for example, where we kind of map the human eyeball and use our Microsoft research team to connect to Disney research, for example, and help them figure out how to do denoising with AI and all this kind of stuff, and 10 times faster, and render, 10 times faster, right? All these different things that they want to do. I think, to James's point, we are still a little while away, right, in terms of what it would look like between an IMAX film versus what's on a LED screen at home, whatever it might be. But we're getting closer, but we're still a little far away. I mean, I think I said it before, I'll say it again, right? I think the technology is only going to get better. I've never seen a period of time, ever. This industry is all about change, right? All about change. You can say that's the only normal that we really have, right? Which is it just changes all the time. I think it's fundamental that this is only going to get better. I think we are maybe a few years out, but I said that a few years ago, and look where we are with AI right now. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's going to be interesting.
Simon,
I was going to say, if you can see the bridge over the uncanny valley, you keep halving it. You're getting closer, but you're never quite getting there. So that's sort of how I describe that. And then I had another thought, but
it's interesting, right? So as we all create content, I was going to almost ask, right? And using data to figure out, do audiences even care, right? To some degree, right? Because they're all watching content, right? I know, right? Right? Because all the content that we now watch on different platforms, right? And whether we have, was it 10-second video, 15-second video, right? It's going to be interesting to figure out how audiences react to different types of, special effects.
I don't think traditional filmmaking is going to go away. You've got, when a director envisions a story, they want the hands-on to be there on set and framing things and having an actor real-time in person react to what they're saying and read your lines this way and imagine if you were in this. It's not, there's a fear around AI that it's going to be everything, and it isn't. Like you say, it's a tool set, right? It's I think always going to be about great producing, great directing, great acting, actual writing, and it's a tool set to augment, to help you. Like, how do I phrase? I can't figure out how to phrase this. Well, put it in Quillbot, and you can figure out how to phrase it. I could have done it. I don't know if you guys watched the Beatles behind the scene, the thing that they released.
His favorite show.
Yeah, when we're all talking to the screen when George Harrison is trying to the words for something in the way she, and we're all going, the way she moves, and he's like, yeah, what would it be? It would be, But maybe if he had Quillbot, he could just stick it in and like, oh, that's there you go. There's the lyric.
One more quick question on AI, and then we're going to go back to the conference to wrap up. Simon, we've seen some big hits like Barbie most recently, and then some misfires at the box office. You knew I was going to ask you this. What are your thoughts on, can AI potentially impact any of
She
that?
was going to ask me this question. So it's interesting. I have some really interesting thoughts about this, right, in terms of how data really drives our industry. So I talked a little bit about saying that, it's the most important thing to protect when we talk about using AI, right, and everything else. But fundamentally, right, this is a really interesting industry, right? From a venture capital perspective, it's almost like the worst return ever, right? We keep spending money all over the place and for one or two hits everywhere. But the reality is we've never used data, right, to really understand everything we really should. We talk about it, right? I've been inside many studios, and the data's not great. We're making interesting decisions based on what creatives think they want to do, and we want to empower creatives because there's always a really important component part, right? But there's a part about making money that's really, really fundamental, which drives everyone else to have the ability to go and do what they want to do, right? And so I think it'll be interesting to see whether AI can be used in such a way that there really is never a miss. That's a really bold statement, right, in terms of where we want to go, but it really should be that we understand what people are after in a totally different way, right? I'm not saying that in a creepy way, because I think AI can be termed somewhat creepy, but I think I would love to see, data used across studios, creative agencies and so on, right, to think about how to leverage what really people are looking for, right? Because we talk about personalization of content. We go on Netflix or whatever else it might be, but it's not truly personalized, right? It kind of knows a little bit about what I watched and where I've seen certain things, but I never really got to what I really enjoyed. What scenes did I really like? Who's in that movie? What did I really get to, right? And so I think there's a lot more we can really do and learn that we've never done. To be perfectly honest, I think the creatives are amazing, and we should never lose that component, right? But I think that even the creatives would love to have more data at their fingertips to help understand what is driving great storytelling, great storylines, everything else. So I think it's going to be there as a really core component, which drives things like Barbie, which is I didn't see Barbie, by the way. I should see it, but I would say that I think. Clearly a few movies that have come out recently have really tapped into something, right? And understanding it now, and leveraging that data to kind of repeat that again is really going to be really important. So I think it's here that can really change the industry in a way that we've never seen.
And then as we have a little bit of time left, and I want to talk about today when we all go out there and, see the exhibits, talk about the panels. I know you want to listen, you want to share ideas, you want to talk about collaboration, but what are some of the takeaways that you'd like everyone to go into this with?
That the companies that provide technology to film, and definitely ours, I've learned being from the production side and coming over to the technology side that oftentimes individual technology companies or individual salespeople within an OEM or a computer company can hold back innovation. In 2023, 2022, we actually give a crap about what you're doing. We're going to lead. The technology companies overtly realize that the media and entertainment business is responsible for all of the innovation, almost all the innovation in CG and in production, and then it trickles to other verticals because they all use it in some form or fashion. And so we really actually care. We're not leading with how many chips do you want? We're going to lead with understanding, becoming part of the community first, and really understanding the plight of production companies. And that's the way we want you to see us, is solving your problems, not meeting our sales quota or worrying about our bottom line. We really all want to innovate with you as we're part of the community just like you are.
Wow. So I'll add to what James said, which is
bad or wow good?
No, well good,
Okay.
well good, well good. From my standpoint, I think putting things like this together are an investment in time, energy, and yourselves, right? We want to make sure we put these things together because these things don't happen very often. And a chance for everyone to come and talk about what's going on in the industry, learn something new, have a conversation, meet people, because it's a really small industry. Everybody seems to know everybody else, right? You walk from one company to another, it's like, oh, I remember you. And so I think from that perspective, at least from our companies, right? Yes, we're high-tech companies, but we care deeply about, what goes on. James said it really correctly, right? Which is that this industry does see the innovation first. We're also the last to adopt it. We don't want to pay for it. Let's just remember that, right? And so I think how we can figure out how to democratize access to this technology, help each other learn and collaborate, remember to embrace the technology, right? Because it does sit firmly between content and audiences all of the time. And it is the differentiator for experiences in terms of that we create, right? And so I think from that perspective, I think both James and I, yes, we've come from the industry, yes, we work at high-tech firms, but we love this space, right? We love this space, right? We like to think that we can create great content. We talk about it all of the time. And we want to make sure you feel emboldened and enabled to do more than you've ever done, right? And so that's really where we kind of finish. So some of you may have seen 2-3 weeks ago, I put out a statement around the fact that Microsoft was kind of deprecating Azure Media Services in terms of what we were doing. Part of that was a decision that we made strategically around the resources that we were deploying towards AI components, right, across all of our tools and capabilities. Part of that was also the fact that partners are a huge part of this landscape, right? And the fact that they also innovate faster. They're focused on specific parts of the workflow, right, and understand how they work. And we also need to stitch them together in a different way, right? Because ultimately, when you do certain productions or whatever else it might be, the focus really needs on making that integration between those partners really seamless, right? And that also comes back to tools that Microsoft is thinking about, like the digital backlot, for example, where we can do smart storage and libraries of content, and we can bring it forward and backwards in terms of where we are. So we also have to make very strategic decisions about resources, right, in terms of where they are, automate where we can, but also invest in the right partners who are also going to do things that Microsoft will never do, right? And that's really where we end up, right? It's all about, like I said, unfortunate profitability and return on investment where we spend our time. But we are heavily invested in our partners, which I know many of them are here today.
Similarly for AMD, we prioritize and because we're part of the community, we recognize the most ubiquitous applications from the ISVs, and we take time to make sure that our silicon is in simpatico with the needs and demands of their customers that use their applications. No one project, no one music video, TV show, feature film uses only one application, and there's a lot of handoff of assets between various different applications. So we take time to make sure that's all working as well as it can be, and it's not a right, that's done. We continue to do it day in, day out. That's part of what we're doing. RFX, founded by Ray Feeney here in Hollywood, we have what we call the AMD Special Projects Room, and we have the latest and greatest CPUs and configurations from all the OEMs, original equipment manufacturers and SIs, and we're constantly machine shopping different configurations for general artist workstations, virtual production, rendering, encoding, you name it. It's every single day, obsessively so. So it's not something we approach with any ounce of complacency.
So I think we're out of time, but they're here all day. So I know they're looking forward to your questions and conversations. So thanks, enjoy the day, and thank you both for kicking this off with such a great conversation.
Thanks so much.
So we're just going to take a quick 10-minute break. In this stage will be machine learning.